Hello everyone, Lemme Warfare. Welcome to the Week 3 episode for the Metamorph in 3.9 Challenge League. As always, I'll try to provide a text release for this episode a few days after the video release. Creating the entire video as a write-up takes a few extra days of work. I sincerely apologize for this inconvenience. For viewers that prefer an audio-only version of the Chaos Report, you'll be able to find it over on my Patreon. Don't worry, the audio-only version is entirely free for now. This is a service that was requested, and I don't have any current plans to lock it behind a paywall. You'll be able to find a link to the text and voice-only versions in the description down below once they have been completed and uploaded. The audio-only version should be available immediately upon release. A quick reminder, you can also find the timestamps to each section in the pinned comment down below. Do keep in mind that this entire video is based on educated guesses or predictions, and as such, they might not be entirely accurate. Furthermore, I might miss a thing or two that seem obvious to many, and for that I apologize. It's hard to cover everything after all. If I do miss something you think is important, leave it in the comments down below. And what that means, of course, is invest at your own risk. With the usual disclaimer out of the way, let's jump right in. The first segment breaks down currencies and commodities, such as the new Exile orbs and Fragments. I'll be giving a quick overview of the most important currencies during this past week, and predictions on how they'll continue to progress in the following one. Exile orbs are first, as always. The OG Exile Orb has seen a slow but steady descent into the 125 Chaos price range since last week's episode. I had predicted a slight price rise to the 150 Chaos range before reaching its ceiling, but I misjudged the exact supply and demand situation for this league due to all the new additions. They have seen an overall lower usage in this league, as well as dropping with an increased frequency due to the Metamorph league mechanic being extremely generous in terms of high-level currency rewards. As a result, they've not only lost some of their demand, as the new Exile orbs are also taking a big bite out of that pie, but also increased in supply. This leads to an oversupply of Exiles, which has resulted in the price decline after the initial Exile bubble bursted around Saturday 28th, which is something that happens in every league at one point or another. People usually like to attribute this to bot ban waves, which is of course utter nonsense. When it comes to currencies, whether in-game or real life, there's speculation around its future prices, just like I'm trying to provide in this video. These speculations can lead to investments into the currency, which lead to an increase in prices for them as the demand for them increases. However, if the currency is not used up or otherwise appropriated, but rather held onto for a potential passive increase, and then pumped back into the economy once a certain price point has been reached, the prices will rapidly drop, as more and more investors will panic sell their saved up currency, leading to a massive oversupply of currency. This is what happened to Bitcoin a few years ago as well, and is commonly occurring phenomenon in the stock market. This is also called the greater fool theory in economic basics. This theory's name was coined on the simple idea that to properly profit off of an investment like this, you require a greater fool than yourself to buy up whatever you bought from another investor. You're not buying something for the actual material or use value of it, but rather for its potential to later be sold for a higher price. As such, you essentially end up relying on the hope that some other investor will come along and validate your own poor investment in their desire to then sell it again for an even higher price to an even greater fool. It is not quite unlike a Ponzi scheme or multi-level marketing in that regard. It infinitely stacks up until finally the so-called bubble bursts and the stock plummets, as the prices were never built on any actual material or use foundational value to begin with. Rather, they were based on investors buying up each other's shares and reselling them, artificially increasing the prices to levels the stock should have never seen in the first place. In general, the too long didn't watch of what I just said is this. The bubble burst, supply is up, and demand is low. Prices fell, but that's normal for any league. They'll stabilize in the near future and then begin a slow upwards curve in the next week or two. As mentioned last week as well, it is very hard to properly predict how far they'll drop before they stabilize themselves again, as it is still difficult to say how the new Exile orbs impact the prices of it exactly. We'll be able to make more precise predictions in the next following episodes and leagues when we more thoroughly understand their role in the crafting and build matters. My current estimate still puts them at roughly 110 to 125 Chaos price point, based on similar drops in previous leagues, which more often than not came close to the 25% of the total pre-drop value. But of course, as always, make sure to check those prices daily, as I can't possibly give you accurate predictions for them via one per week video series. As for the new Exalted Orbs in the Awakener Orb, let's take a look at him. The Hunter's Exalted Orb is still one of the most expensive one of the new orbs. It is currently sitting at around 349 Chaos after continuing its drop from last week. There have been no major changes in the usage for this orb, so the supply and demand for it have been barely changed since the last episode. Currently, it looks like they're in a bit of a drop after a moderate plateau near the 400 chaos area, which might indicate a further dip in the prices for the next few days. However, as per usual, predicting the prices for these orbs is extremely difficult, so take all of this with a slight grain of salt at least. The Awakener Orb is currently sitting at around 228 chaos and has also been continuing its price drop since last week. A large portion of this price drop, similar to the Hunter's Orb actually, is due to the Exalted Orb losing their value as well. As most of the new orbs were priced in Exalted Orbs over the past week or two, they were directly affected by the loss of value for the OG orbs. Awakener Orbs in general have been mostly steady, losing a few chaos a day of value in the past days, which might project a future stabilization of the prices or potentially even a slight rise. We'll also be covering the crafting uses for the Awakener Orb in today's strategy and discussion segment later in the video, so stay tuned for that. You might also be able to buy them cheap at this price point and make a killing by crafting with this, after the video is over. Crusaders and Warlords Exalted Orbs have also seen a similar price drop and are now at 175 chaos and 265 chaos respectively. The Warlords Exalted Orb is the only orb out of all the new ones that has seen a slight rise over the past week in general. I'm not entirely sure what caused that bump over the weekend, but it's likely that it was a short-term demand increase caused by a content creator or a thread on a forum or Reddit. The orb has since then dropped drastically and is on its way to the 261 chaos area where it was before the rise. It will likely continue to drop even farther, getting its prices closer to the Crusader Orb again. The Crusader Orb, on the other hand, has slowed its decline over the past few days, also indicating a stabilization with a potential rise for the future. Lastly, the Redeemer's Exalted Orb. It has seen the smallest decline of all the new orbs and has already stabilized itself at the 155 chaos price point for a few days. The mods for the Redeemer still haven't found a lot of popularity outside of its own niche, and as a result, the demand is quite limited compared to the other orbs. The only reason it declined the least is because its original price from last week was already the lowest of the bunch. It couldn't really drop much before dipping even below the OG orbs, which have also seen a large price drop as mentioned in the earlier sections as well. The Redeemer is likely going to stick around this price point for at least a small while, as it seems rather steady for now. As always, if you intend on buying any of them, make sure to keep an eye on this extremely volatile market space and rank them in your own order, so you know which one to go for first. Alteration orbs are currently going at a 1 to 6.5 ratio, which is close to the price we predicted last week. We've explained the reasoning for the comparatively high prices in the past few episodes, so I won't be repeating them here. They continue to be extremely popular for the crafting of Awakener Orb items especially, as will be shown later in the video. They've seen a slight price drop over the past 2 days, but have already recovered and are projected to increase further in the coming few days. I'd expect them to hit a 1 to 6 ratio fairly soon as a result. My usual reminder for Alteration Orbs: if they reach the 1 to 6 or 1 to 5 ratio, make sure to pick up a few more rare items every map, as it'll be worth the time to sell them for extra alteration shards. Last on our list, the Ancient Orb. They have also followed our predictions from last week. Placed at a roughly 45 chaos mark at the moment, it is now a decent time to sell your stocked up Ancient Orbs if you've been holding onto them since the beginning of the leak. While waiting might give you an even higher payout at a later time, the prices are unlikely to fluctuate more than 25% upwards, whereby a price drop can definitely be a lot larger. As the Hand Hunter is also slightly on the decline, the prices for these orbs are potentially going to follow suit in the near future. On the other hand, we compared the prices to last league's progression in the previous episode, and figured out that they also have a possibility to practically shoot up to a 55 chaos price point. This is an unlikely scenario in this league, however, as Exalted Orbs aren't worth as much as the chaos as they were last league, and the Headhunter is always priced in Exalted Orbs. As a direct result, the Ancient to Chaos ratio is affected. By this time last league, the Headhunter was only about 60 to 65 Exalted Orbs, whereby now they're sitting at over 95 Exalted Orbs each. And the Headhunter was still worth more chaos, comparatively to now. With those different futures in mind, my prediction for them is the following week will be a price stabilization around this point, with a potential fluctuation by about 5 chaos up or down. Lastly, always remember to save up a few of them at once and sell them in bulk, because this can give you 3 to 5 extra chaos per orb. Now, for the commodity section, we'll be covering the different fragment pieces, as well as the new synthesis and Guardian map drops. I'll quickly update you on the price for the different maps and fragments for this week. Shaper fragments range from 35 to 50 chaos, meaning that one Shaper set will net you around 200 chaos at average. This is pretty much the exact same price as the last 2 weeks, and plus minus like a little bit. On the other hand, however, the fragments dropped by Shaper, which unlock Uberelder, have slightly dipped to a 145 to 150 chaos price point. This means that simply for beating the Shaper and having a chance at any of those drops, you're only really paying about 40 to 50 chaos at the moment. All you need is roughly like one decent drop every 5 to 6 runs at average. It's definitely in the realm of statistical probability, and if you get one of the high ticket items, you're in the green for a long time. As mentioned, the Uberelder fragments provided by Shaper are sitting at around 145 to 150 chaos each, while the ones provided by Elder are sitting at around 30 chaos. That means one Uberelder set will cost you around 350 to 400 chaos at average. This is one of the reasons that the Uberelder unique items are worth still multiple Exalted Orbs, even if their demand is not necessarily high. Due to the high barrier of entry, the supply is simply not there to drastically push down the prices on them for a while. Similar advice here to the last week. If you're willing to gamble and got a good grasp on the mechanics of Uberelder, there's a ton of money to be made running him for now. Especially hitting the right Val Orb on a Void Fletcher drop can net a really decent sum of currency. The Elder Fragments themselves are sitting at around 24 to 39 chaos each, meaning that one set will cost you around 120 to 140 chaos, which is pretty much the same as last week. Right now, I would still recommend running your own Elder sets and selling the resulting items to other players. Some of the unique items are worth quite a bit, and especially Watcher's Eyes are in super high demand. Additionally, the resulting Uberelder fragments will come in handy for your own Uberelder attempts, or recouping some of the costs of running the Elder fight itself. It seems that these fragments are staying fairly steady at the current prices, slowly rising due to general chaos inflation, of course, which is nothing out of the ordinary. I'd expect them to stick around this price point, just like they have been for the past few weeks. Lastly, the Synthesis unique maps are still sitting at around 32 to 35 chaos right now. The Cortex, on the other hand, has risen to a 220 chaos price point, and has been staying rather steady around this area with some slight fluctuations. As explained last week, this is likely a result of the increase in popularity for the Bottled Faith, as well as the Maloney's Mechanism, which are both uniques limited to the Synthesis areas and bosses. The maps overall are very worth it to run yourself, if you're keen on gambling, as the Synthesis modifiers provided the maps can be real hit or miss. Especially the Herald Rings, which drop from the bosses quite often, net upwards of a few Exalted Orbs in prices, with the right combinations and implicits. The prices for the Cortex will likely continue to fluctuate around the areas it's sitting at right now, but might also dip further, depending on the Bottled Faith and Maloney's prices. With those prices and commodities covered, let's move on to a unique item watchlist. First up on our list, the double-socketed Tombfists. The Tombfists have seen a larger price drop since last week, and have found themselves at a 178 chaos mark, which is about 100 chaos lower than last week. We had predicted that this could be a possibility earlier in the league, as the new influence type mods are extremely powerful, especially for gloves, and the new Awakened melee Fizz gem entirely replaces the main benefit the Tombfists provide for melee characters. As a result, the demand for them has drastically diminished over the past week, as more players have gotten to the point where they're comfortable spending a few Exalted Orbs crafting some good influence-based gloves. Furthermore, with the additional increase in summoners, the overall player base has also shifted away from the Tombfists in general. They are still quite worthwhile to pick up as a new attack-based character, but they will likely continue to lose value for quite some time. I doubt they'll become completely worthless, but I wouldn't be surprised to see them dip below the 100 chaos price point in the following weeks. The Void Fletcher unique bow is up next on the list. The quiver is still locked behind the Uber fight, which diminishes the potential for it to drop drastically quite a lot. It's currently sitting at around 400 chaos after its continued drop from last week, but is projected to potentially drop further in the following one. Another important aspect to the Void Fletcher to consider, which I've mentioned last week as well, is that oftentimes players will try to corrupt away the Pierce implicit, as it can ruin some builds. Successfully corrupted Void Fletchers in that manner are way more expensive than the base version of the unique. They easily score prices at the 12x plus area. Same advice as last time, if you intend to corrupt this thing, I would highly advise the Corruption Chamber in Alva's Temple. The double implicit can really bump the price, and usability of this quiver in general. The last unique item on the list is the Coast Breeze Malice. This sword is a staple in the Cast on Crit playstyle, and has seen huge popularity over the last week as a result. It is usually used by Cyclonists in combination with the Ice Nova skill. The Coast Breeze Malice is currently sitting at around 5.5x, or about 655 chaos, after a decent price drop, and is likely going to see further decrease in prices. One important thing to note, however, is that the Coast Breeze hasn't really diminished much in popularity, as its price has only decreased by about half of an Exalted Orb. Rather, the price decreases for Exalted Orbs have led to a nearly 200 chaos dip in prices, as the 6x back last week were worth a lot more than the 5.5 to 6x that they're worth right now in terms of chaos. As mentioned earlier, the prices will likely continue to dip until the Exalted Orbs stabilize. Once they do, we'll likely be able to observe a more exact representation of the Ghost Priest demand and supply situation. Now, moving on to our third segment for this video, the meta-analysis. Since last week, we've seen another increase in summoners joining the ladder, while pushing farther away from the Saboteur brothers and others. Necromancers are up to a 29% play rate, which is a 2% up since last week, while Saboteurs have dropped by a further 3% to an overall 11% play rate. As mentioned with last week's episode, a lot of players has opted into the easy way out, namely summoner builds, to deal with the high difficulty of this League plus expansion combo. This is further exaggerated by the community on Twitch, YouTube, and Reddit recommending this playstyle to any struggling players. Due to more and more people switching to it, it automatically becomes a more popular option for future builds, as it signifies a working solution to players. Nobody wants to start a character, invest time and currency into it, only to realize their chosen build is simply not working. This has led to a lot of the samey metas in the past, and we're heading right towards it again, with this League plus expansion iteration and the summoners being a very powerful and easy choice to make. Additionally, the ladder has moved into the 95 to 100 bracket, which has cut off the level 94 characters from showing up on this analysis. This can also lead to a slight false positive, as more survivable characters will more likely reach those higher levels than others. Summoners, being one of the most tanky and or safe builds out there, have an easier time to reach these levels early into the life cycle of the League. With all these things considered, it is likely that the ladder will continue this progression for the next while, as Necromancers are an extremely powerful and popular choice, leading to even more players gravitating towards it as a result. As a result, we'll continue our crafting efforts on summoners. However, assassins have also gained a few percentage points since last week and are on the rise. So don't throw away all your spell damage and crit bases or craft quite yet. We'll likely see them continue their rise as well, and potentially overtake Saboteurs in the next week or two. It is, however, unlikely that we'll see a major shift in the meta from this point onward, so feel free to invest more heavily into summoner-related gear, as the value for it will likely stay the same or increase rather than decline with the dying player base. As for the Atlas analysis, there's not much to talk about this week. My recommendations and advice from the past few episodes still apply and hasn't changed. If you care about them, please check out the previous week's videos and text releases. One thing of note, however, is that I have seen a lot of people struggle with proper sextant usage. The basic gist of the sextant changes in 3.9 is this. Sextants no longer have a base level requirement. You can use any sextant on any map. Sextants are used on watchstones affecting a sector, rather than local to its specific maps. Sextants are now global for any given sector once a socketed watchstone is socketed. Sextants have barely any bad mods now. For general use, I would recommend starting to sextant your watchstones once you've acquired about 20 of them and are starting or are moderately far into the red tier maps. Simply spam the sextants on all your watchstones. Your watchstones roll mods individually, meaning you can even end up with 4 of the same mod in the same sector. They won't stack, but they'll each be able to re-rolled, which means sextant blocking is 100% dead at this point in the game. One last tip, you can switch out your watchstones after you've sextanted them. If you roll some high value mods such as the following 3, Nemesis monsters drop additional currency, you cannot take reflected damage, unidentified maps have extra IIQ. Make sure to save them up for the right maps. Simply place them into a sector you don't plan to run, or remove them from your atlas entirely, and have them sit in your storage until you're prepared the proper maps for each mod on the list. You can, of course, do this for even more mods, and I would highly recommend it. But those 3 mods are absolutely worth saving for the right ones, whereby the other mods are more of the rich get richer scenario. You'll make a decent profit off of the other mods as well, even without 100% proper investment. One reminder, there will be a patch soon that fixes the sextants for influenced areas, which will drastically improve usability and demand for them. As such, make sure to stock up on them before the patch hits, as they'll likely increase in prices with the vastly increased demand. With the meta and atlas analysis finished, let's jump right into the strategy discussion for this next week. I'll be covering the new Awakener Orb and explaining its mechanics, as well as giving a direct example from one of the items I recently crafted on my stream to give further visual aids for your understanding. The Awakener Orb has seen quite a lot of usage over the past few weeks, especially due to an exploit that was mentioned in last week's episode. However, even with the exploit fixed, this orb represents an insanely powerful crafting tool, the likes we've never really seen in the Path of Exile before. It is only obtainable through the Awakener boss fight, and seems to only drop once you have at least 5 Awakening levels or higher. I'm not 100% sure about this, but I've never seen anybody get the orb with fewer than 5. You generally want to run the Awakener at the highest level you possibly can, which is likely 8 for most people that are watching this far into the video, as this guarantees you the highest possible chance to get one of these to drop for yourself. Outside of dropping from the boss fight, you can only acquire it through buying it from other players. There are no divination cards or anything of the sort. The orb has a few mechanics and important tidbits that are unique to it, and exist on no other crafting tool in the game. However, it also shares a few specific rules with other crafting tools. The description of it state the following: destroys an item, applying its influence to another of the same item class. This first sentence is fairly straightforward. If you've used any of the new Exalted Orbs before, you'll right-click the orb, then left-click the first item, the one you want to sacrifice, and then left-click again onto the item you want to give the influence to. The first item will be permanently destroyed, however, so keep that in mind. The second item will remain exactly the same base as it was before. As such, you can even 6-link and 30% quality craft it before you use this orb. It will retain the same quality and link setup as well as the base type. One part that is unlike the other orbs, however, is that you cannot use this orb on uninfluenced items. Both items you wish to combine have to have an influence type already before you attempt the craft. As an example, you cannot sacrifice a normal jeweled foil to try and apply a mod to a Shaper Val rapier. Another part that is similar to old items is the second sentence. The second item is reforged as a rare item with both influence types and new modifiers. This part is not quite accurate, however, as it describes the item being reforged as a rare item with simply both influences applied and entirely new mods. However, the important part here is that the new modifiers aspect only applies to 4 out of the possible 6 affixes. 2 of the affixes can be chosen by the player. The Awakener Orb chooses one influence-specific affix from each item, usually named after the influence itself, like the Crusaders, the Shapers, etc., and guarantees that those mods will exist on the new item. This is the part that makes this orb so powerful. If you have ever wanted a +1 curse and physical explosion chess piece, with this orb, you can easily guarantee this outcome by simply alt-spamming both bases to have the mods as the only influence mods on each item respectively. The outcome will then be a chess piece with a guaranteed +1 curse and physical explosion affix combination, and then up to 4 other random affixes from both influence types as well as the base type mods. Important to note here is that the item will always result in a rare item, even if only a prefix and a suffix influence mod was chosen. If there are more than 1 influence mods on an item, the Awakener Orb will randomly choose one over the other. If there's 2, it'll be 50-50 for either. If there's 3, it will be a 33% chance for each to be chosen. You can only ever combine 1 mod from each item, no matter how many influence mods exist on it. Assuming you would have 5 influence mods on one item and 1 on another, you will still only end up with 1 mod from each item. The item with 1 mod would guarantee that specific mod, and the item with 5 influence mods will randomly choose one of them, each having a 20% chance to be chosen. To illustrate the rather confusing explanations before, I've prepared a direct example in one of my recent streams. My goal here is to craft a bow for my next character, which will be a galvanic arrow-using bow character. As such, I've decided to heavily invest on lightning penetration on my weapon, as penetration has become quite a lot harder to obtain in the 3.9 patch due to the nerfs to the crafted penetration mod from Betrayal. I had looked around and decided to go with the Shaper plus Crusader combination, as both offer a decent option for penetration. The Crusader mod here was Alterations spammed until I got it, and it is the tier 1 flat lightning plus lightning penetration mod. As you can see on the screen, it is simply called Crusaders, and it's a prefix. You can also see that in the corners of the item screen, both influence markers appear as the Crusader icon. This is because this item is only influenced by the Crusader type at the current moment. Additionally, this item is also my base that I'll be doing the craft on, which made it important to choose the right base, a Harbinger bow here, as well as the eye level for it. The Awakener Orb will later transfer all the mods onto it, so it could have already 30%ed it with perfect fossils before Alteration spammed it for the craft, if I would have had any. I could have also easily 6-linked it using the quality crafts and fossils afterwards, to get an easy 40% plus quality for the linking. However, I didn't do this due to time shortage, so let's just move on and pretend that I did it. The second item here is the Sacrificial Shaper Bow. The base for this one is entirely irrelevant, outside of the fact that it needs to be a bow and it needs to have an influence on it. I've Alterations spammed it until it hit the tier 1 penetration mod called the Shapers. It would not matter if I would have had any suffixes on either of these items, by the way, as long as they aren't influenced specific mods. You don't need to annul the items down to a singular modifier, as long as they aren't part of the influence-specific pool. Additional mods do not matter. You could have 5 mods and 1 influence mod, and it would still pick the influence mod 100% of the time. Now, as explained before, from this point, I right-click the Awakener Orb, then left-click the Shaper Bow, which is going to be destroyed, and then left-click the Crusader Bow. The Crusader Bow will then be recrafted as a rare item, despite both being magic, and will get random affixes in addition to the 2 mods we had guaranteed beforehand. You can see the outcome of the craft here. I have both the Shaper's penetration mod, as well as the hybrid the Crusader's Flat Lightning plus penetration mod, as 2 of the possible 6 affixes. Aside from those 2 guaranteed mods, I also got 2 random suffixes due to the reroll. You can end up with a total of 4, but I got lucky here and only got 2 suffixes. This allowed me to then scour the suffixes and continue with a simple multi-mod to finish the bow. You'll also be able to see that the item now has both influence types. This is depicted on the top left and top right corner of the item screen by each influence's respective icon, as well as on the item art itself, as it is now covered in Shaper's celestial background, as well as the Crusader's lightning style overlay on the item itself. One last thing, in case you were thinking of metacrafting and potentially blocking suffixes and prefixes before you use the Awakener Orb, this is exactly what the exploit from last week was about. This has already been hotfixed and is no longer possible. You cannot metacraft the Awakener Orb any longer, so don't waste the good bases and Exalted Orbs on any such tries. This concludes the basic rundown of the Awakener Orb crafting. I hope this was informative, and you will now be able to properly use it for future crafts of your own. It's incredibly powerful, and actually not as expensive to craft with, as many of you might have expected in the first place. This is oftentimes a better investment than even multi-modding an individual influence item, as the Awakener Orbs are stupidly cheap at the current point in time. If there are any questions left about the Awakener Orb crafting, feel free to leave a comment down below. I'll try to answer them as soon as possible. Additionally, if you have something you would like me to cover on next week's strategy or discussion segment, feel free to leave in the comments down below as well. This can range from anything data related, over strategy research, to simply statistical breakdowns of certain metas or items, or any other guides like I just did. I'll try my best to oblige any requests. Otherwise, I'll simply be covering whatever comes up in the meantime in next week's episode. Now, for the last little segment, I'll be covering the weekly Delve update. The Delve update, as delving is still and will always be one of the best ways to make a large amount of currency in the game. Comparatively to last week, we've only seen slight changes in the land of Delve. The best fossils to farm are still the corroded, serrated, and shattering fossils. Etheric, perfect, bound, and prismatic fossils are following closely after. As a result of this ranking, my recommendation stays the same as well. The area you should focus on to make the most possible money through selling your fossils to other flyer will be the Petrified Forest first and the Sulfur Vent second. They drop primarily bound, corroded, and etheric perfect fossils respectively. Frozen Hollows, however, are getting more and more popular, especially due to their farming simplicity, as the fractured walls are easy to find and they drop a ton of pristine prismatic combinations. This is also the only area to reliably obtain the sought-after serrated fossils in large quantities. As a result, I would highly recommend this area for non-delve specific builds, as it is a lot easier to darkness delve in this biome than in the other 2 mentioned before. The current prices for this week's top fossils are as follows. Corroded fossils have dropped down to 13 chaos. Serrated fossils have risen to 13 chaos and are now tied with the corroded for first place. Shattering fossils have also risen to 10 chaos. Perfect and etheric fossils have stayed at their 7 chaos prime points each. Bound and prismatic fossils have dropped to 6 chaos each, and pristine fossils are still sitting at the 4 chaos prime price point from the last 2 weeks as well. Happy fossil hunting and good luck in your delves. Now, getting into the rapid fire tips and tricks section for this video. Spam run those blighted maps. We've covered the blighted maps extremely in depth in last league's chaos reports and concluded that they're extremely worthwhile. However, it seems that many have either forgotten about this or simply don't care, as the blighted maps right now are extremely cheap for the amount of profit they provide. Especially with teal oils in Awakener level 8, any blighted maps, even white ones, are extremely profitable at the current moment. If you can manage to run high tier blighted maps, those are obviously your go-to, but everyone should easily be able to handle white ones at this point in the league, and they're a lot cheaper as well. I recommend 20%ing your blighted maps, anointing them with 3 teal oils, and then throwing them into the map device as a white map. The extra quantity added by alking them is not usually worth the risk of breaking the map as a direct result of the mobs added. Fossil craft your Stygian Vices. As in every league since Abyss, Stygian Vices are the most popular belt base and are extremely profitable to craft. Simply put together a pristine plus prismatic fossil combination and slam it into an eye level 86 plus Stygian Vice. You'll only need a few tries to end up with a decent double or triple res plus HP belt by average. These belts can go from anywhere between 50 chaos up to the high 10 to 20 exalted orbs depending on your exact rolls and auxiliary mods. This fossil combination will also oftentimes roll weapon elemental damage as well as the delve elemental damage mod. Convert your unused Azerite into chaos. Same recommendation as last league. If you have been delving for a while, you probably got a ton of Azerite saved up from the Delve's open wounds. Simply talk to Nico in the Delve area and buy his resonators. The current best Azerite to Chaos ratio is the Primitive Chaotic Resonator. You can translate 300 Azerite into 2 Chaos by buying these and selling them to other players. You can increase this profit margin further by selling them in bulk, easily being able to ask for 3 to 4 Chaos apiece, and if you've got a decent sized stack to offer, of course. And with those last few tips wrapped up, I'll be ending this Chaos report. Whew. I hope this video was informative and you learned something from it that you can apply to your own game. Please let me know if I missed anything or you would have wanted me to talk about anything specific that I might not have covered. If you want to support the creation of these videos, feel free to check out my Patreon, and maybe consider signing up for it. You can find a link to it in the description down below. Any and all support is highly appreciated. If you have any suggestions for Patreon rewards that you guys would like to see, please let me know in my Discord's feedback channel, down below in this video in the comments, or on my Twitter. I read all of your comments everywhere. You can find a link to my Twitter and Discord down below in the descriptions as well. And of course, don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell thingamajig, like or dislike the video, and check me out over on twitch.tv/LemmeWolf. I stream pretty much every day and will be live throughout the entire next week as well. If you need background noise, I'll always gladly be yours. You can find a link to the stream in the description down below as well. And with that, thanks for watching, and keep farming those Exiles.